All right, so today I want to make a video updating everyone as usual. We got some big stories as always. Again, these days it seems like there's always big stories going out or going on, so stay tuned for that. Getting into the cases from Canada yesterday, Canada's up to 81,786 confirmed cases, 6,182 dead. Alberta is down to 865 active cases. We had just 32 new cases yesterday. That's about 70-ish cases that were covered yesterday and only 32 new cases. So again, more than double the amount of recoveries as new cases. So again, that's another good sign. Still 6 people in the ICU. I think we're maybe down one person roughly in the hospital, 54 in the province, but only 9 outside of Calgary, and only 7 north of Calgary. So again, we have 7 people in the hospital north of Calgary, 1 in the ICU. So again, the thing I keep pointing out, but again, so many people don't seem to understand, most of which are not people watching this video, but um, there's no point for not having things fully reopen right now. And the reason for me saying that is like I pointed out, but I always have new viewers, so um, the way when deciding whether or not we should reopen, one of the first and one of the main things that should be considered by government is, okay, well, let's look at some of the places that have been open for more than 2 weeks and how have things turned out there, because the incubation period is up to 2 weeks. Usually it's within a week, but it can be up to 2 weeks. So what has gone on in those other places? Have they had any issues and whatnot? And when you look at the other places, they've had no issues. You've had, like I say, Sweden never fully closed, South Dakota never fully closed, Georgia's been open for at least 3, 4 weeks now. Florida, both Florida beaches have been open for weeks now. I think Arizona's had restaurants open for more than 2 weeks. So the idea of the lockdowns, and again, none of those places have had any issues that I've heard of. And the point being is that the people don't even most people I don't even think believe it anymore, because if people were actually so scared, you wouldn't see thousands of people on beaches in Florida and beaches in Virginia, beaches in Georgia. You wouldn't see that. So the idea that people are so scared, this is one of the arguments I hear constantly about people who don't want to go back to work, is, oh, I'm scared, I don't feel safe. Well, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter, because most of you are people who are perfectly fine going to Walmart. You're perfectly fine going to the beach. Now, I know this isn't really happening in Canada, but it's still pretty much the same point. If you're perfectly fine with doing all that kind of stuff, then why are you not okay to go to work? You can still practice social distancing. You can wear a mask if you want. Not that either one, I suggest either one of those things, because there's no evidence that proves social distancing works. It just sounds good in theory, so everybody just believes it. And wearing a mask technically does help, but it also has negative ramifications. It will downregulate your immune system. It makes it harder to breathe, and other stuff too. So wearing a mask, yes, it has its benefits, and if you are sick, I would strongly suggest wearing it. But if you're healthy, then I wouldn't wear one. Now the decision is up to you. I'm just saying what I personally believe. Um, so yeah, that's the point being, is that if we know, if there's tons of examples of places that have been fully reopened or at the very close to fully reopened, then what is holding us back? Now, like I said, the point being is that you've even had Fauci come out, who's a guy who was big on the lockdowns and big on keeping the lockdowns going for most of this, who just came out and said, yeah, we can't keep things locked down forever. It's not realistic. So even the quote unquote experts, which I hate using that term, because the definition of an expert for most of these crazy leftists is someone who agrees with us. Again, Rand Paul, who's literally a medical doctor, he can't have an opinion on something, but Greta Thunberg can when she's a high school dropout. Again, that's the leftist logic. Their definition of an expert is someone who agrees with them. Let's just be honest. There was an epidemiologist who literally was one of the top who used to work for a university, I believe. But anyway, he's an epidemiologist who should be someone who's one of the world's foremost experts, who disagree with the lockdown. Guess what? YouTube took down his video with over 1 million views. So the idea of the left is, whenever they make this claim, oh, you're not an expert, who cares about your opinion? I don't care, because we literally have had experts, or people who are medical doctors, who have had their opinions censored because they all want to reopen, or don't even believe in closing in the first place. So again, when you're saying that, what you're really saying is we should silence you because of your opinion, not because I'm not an expert, because you want to silence the experts as well. So that's a stupid argument. Um, and I talked about that too. I talked about that epidemiologist too who was censored. But anyway, that's kind of the first points I wanted to bring up. Um, Getting to this point here, an update. This is from Paul Mitchell. An update to Apple's iOS will allow the Alberta government's AB Trace Together app to operate in the background and when the iPhone is locked. So Jason Kenney's government can spy on Albertans 24/7. Sounds like China, not Alberta. Now, um, first of all, do not download that app. I believe I brought it up before, but don't even think about downloading the app. And if you downloaded the app, delete it right now because there's no reason to have this app. The what is there, a handful of active cases in Edmonton? What's the point of even downloading it? And not only that, like most of Canada, and even if it is the case, if you're someone who's that paranoid, then just stay home. Just stay home. For most people, if you're someone who's healthy, um, you have nothing to worry about. Like I say, I keep talking about, but I like pointing it out because it's a good example. I see all these parents online saying, "Oh, I'm scared to send my kid back to daycare, or to school, or to camp," and yet they're completely oblivious to reality because there isn't a case in Canada of someone under the age of 20 dying from the virus. There's only a handful of people under the age of 40. So there's not one example of someone dying. You're more likely to die from the flu if you're under 20, but yet you have these idiot parents who are scared to send their kids back. And it just proves my theory that most of the people that want to keep things locked down are people who are just brainwashed. They have no idea what they're talking about. None of these parents don't let their kids go to school during flu season or to daycare. None of them. Maybe like 0.1% maybe. But if you're worried about this, you should be more worried about the flu because the flu is more likely to kill your kids. So that's the one thing to point out there. And like I say, getting back to the whole app thing, don't download it again. This is something straight out of an authoritarian country. And the other point I wanted to bring up with this is that the left constantly harps on the UCP in Alberta, again the NDP. That's all they do. They complain about healthcare and public. That's literally all they do. And the reason for that, the reason why they never gain much ground aside from the far left is that what the average person hears when they hear them talk is we want socialism. Capitalism bad, we want socialism. And if they actually cared about finding common ground and to getting people to change their minds and agree with them, or at least consider agreeing with them, they would bring stuff like this up because most people who are on the right value their freedom. And when they hear stuff like this, it makes them mad. The reason why the left doesn't complain about this stuff is number one, they're oblivious to reality. They don't actually pay attention to most of the actual stuff that matters. And number two, they like authoritarianism. So that's why this is basically textbook authoritarianism, so they don't care. This is from Tom Quiggin. He goes on to say the Bank of Canada is warning about a potential solvency crisis as well as excessively high personal debt loads for consumers. Both are aggravated by the current lockdowns. And it's the Bank of Canada warning new report. Now, like I've been saying over and over again, mark my words, the ramifications from keeping things locked down or even locking down in the first place is going to be far worse than the lockdowns. Like I've said probably at least 10 times, but I want to keep saying it because I think it's blatantly obvious that the economic ramifications will be far worse. And we've had high-level people in the industries talking about this. 25-30% unemployment is much more scary to think about than 5,000-6,000 people dying, 80% of them being people who are already in their 80s. Like I said, I believe the average age of someone dying of the virus in Canada is 80. The average person lives to be like 80. So again, what do you have to complain about? Yeah, I know you probably should live a little longer, but if you told the average person that you're going to live as long as the average person, do they have much to complain about? Like, no. So that's the one thing to point out. Now, I believe that it's more important to preserve the future than it is the here and now. That's why I don't believe in deficits. That yeah, it helps out in the here and now, but it really hurts down the road. So that's why. And like I say, the other thing being is that we can quarantine old folks' homes. If we would have taken someone like me's advice from day one and closed the borders, quarantine nursing homes, uh, and suggest that people who have underlying health conditions stay home, we could have kept things open, and we could have arguably probably not even had as many people die from this, because if we would have taken it seriously, then we would have mitigated the spread from day one. So this is from William Makis. He's an MD from Alberta, and he says I'm currently the only Alberta physician who's facing and winning court attacks by former Premier Rachel Notley for speaking out on Twitter. The NDP are furious that their corruption scandals buried by the media can still be exposed on Twitter. Thank God for Twitter. Now, again, this is something I was completely unaware of, but the reason why I wanted to bring it up is that if you hear all these NDP and leftists complain on a daily basis about the UCP, it's always, oh, their health minister, he's corrupt. And again, I'm not the hugest fan of the guy, but he's corrupt, and the UCP, they're corrupt, and they're cutting healthcare, and it's a terrible thing, and they're crazy, and all this kind of stuff they complain about. Now, personally, and I think most people probably agree with this, I completely tune those people out. I literally don't care what they're saying, because they do the exact same stuff. Okay, they're just as or more corrupt than anything that the UCP is doing. So again, it's literally the classic pot calling the kettle black scenario. And whenever people are aware of that, all of a sudden they don't care about your trying to expose the UCP corruption, because at least they're doing what's best for Alberta. They don't just want socialism. The solution to everything, according to the NDP, is socialism, which doesn't work. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. The last thing I wanted to bring up is Trump tweeted out on Monday, "Oil energy is back." Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about it is that you had the Greens, you had Elizabeth May, who I believe is the former leader of the Green Party of Canada, talking about, oh, oil is dead. And this is something you constantly hear from people on the left. Now, if oil is dead, then why are so many other countries in the world not transitioning away from oil and gas? It's almost like we're pretty much the only ones. You know, we had countries like Germany do it and turn around, and um, they have routine power outages. The cost of uh, powering your house has gone way up. It's almost like wind and solar isn't the future, like you idiots claim. It's almost like oil and gas is the future, at least for the next at least 100 years or so. So that's the one thing I wanted to bring up, that you have a lot of right wingers who believe this too, or even centrists, that oil and gas is the near future. I think at least the next 100 years. We're not going green. We're not going solar, unless the government literally forces us to. But that's another thing in and of itself. But it's not going to happen, and it's one thing I wanted to point out. So anyway, if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last couple things, as always, check me out on Twitter if you haven't already. Check me out on BitChute also as well. Again, all the links are in the description, so check them all out there.